All right, I wanted to do something different on the channel. Fiddling around with OBS, I've just realised that you can record as well as stream. That's been using this software, been using this software for the past 6-7 years. So that's a new. That's just how tech savvy I am. But I wanted to do a tier video. I see a lot of these tier videos cropping up on other people's channels, and I always think they're quite cool to sort of put things where you know, A, B, C, D. And you can do it with all sorts of films, like horror films, Star Wars films, video game characters, video game franchises, consoles. So I kind of want to just do that and just sort of get my little 2 cents in there just to see where things fluctuate on the tier system and stuff. So I wanted to start off by doing a franchise that's very near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favourite franchises of all time, and that's Resident Evil. So I'm going to try and rate all the Resident Evil games, and it's only my opinion. Yours will be different. Everyone's got a different opinion. That's great. Don't take it too seriously. But I just want to try and scale where I think the Resident Evil franchise sort of fits in. There's quite a lot of games that aren't in the mainline series, so I'm just going to be going through the mainline series at first, and then I'll fanny on with all the stuff like Operation Raccoon City and all that stuff. So Resident Evil, I first played Resident Evil 1 on the PlayStation, on the original PlayStation, before I even had a PlayStation. I remember my mum's friend at the time used to babysit me and my sister, and she had a daughter and a son. Son was a lot older. He was always at work, and then my sister used to just sit and play with dolls and stuff, and I was bored out of my mind. And then Jean, the lady who was babysitting me, she goes, "Well, do you want to go and play on my son's PlayStation?" And I was like, "What is a PlayStation?" And she was like, "Oh, we'll go upstairs and I'll show you." And it was like his room was a shithole. And it was this computer game, and I already had like a NES and a Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, so it was like the next stage of what gaming was, and I was just like, what the hell's this? And he had loads of games like the Die Hard trilogy, Abe's Odyssey, Tekken, there was G-Police, Tomb Raider, Destruction Derby, Final Fantasy VII, and Resident Evil. And I remember playing Resident Evil, and I think I got to the first zombie in the corridor where he turns around, and I turned it off because I was just terrified. So I want to do that. So we're going to do it. So let's go for it. So here we go. We've got S, A, B, C, and D. D's obviously terrible. C's okay. B's good. A's amazing. And S is just superior. So I'm going to judge this by... I'm not going to try and go down the nostalgia route. Or maybe should I? Should I go down the nostalgia route? Because the first game on the chopping block is Resident Evil, the original. I've noticed that Director's Cut isn't on here either. And Resident Evil, for me, if I'm looking at it at a nostalgic point of view, it's going straight up there. But by today's standards, it's probably there for me, really. I don't think it's aged well at all. The voice acting's totally cringe. The controls are really clunky now. And it's just not aged very well. In the likes of, if you play Resident Evil 2 now, I think Resident Evil 2 still holds up, the original. I would actually put that as probably there. But Resident Evil, I don't know, because if we're talking about nostalgia, it's the game that got me into franchise, and it's there. Do you know what I mean? But if I'm judging it by today's standards, I'll go nostalgia. No, I'm not going to go nostalgia. It's a B. And I might move stuff around because there's some games there that are just like, I would say, well, we'll get to them in a minute. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. In fact, I'll put that there. That there. Nemesis is a B. But Resident Evil, I think I've just stormed ahead too quickly. Let's just talk about each game for a little bit. Resident Evil, the story's amazing. The guy on the actual cover, a lot of people think that's Chris. It's actually not. It's Richard Arkin, who's the guy who got bitten by the snake. But Resident Evil for me was it created the survival horror genre in a way, or if it didn't create it, it certainly redefined it. But yeah, it's quite difficult. I mean, this is the first one and I'm already getting sort of stuck on it. I'll put it at a B, because it's not as good as Resident Evil 2 is better, but it's still a great entry. It sets the tone. So I'll keep it at a B. I don't think it's an S and I don't think it's an A, because going into the next game, I think Resident Evil 2 is still considered one of the best games in the franchise, in my opinion. Resident Evil 2, obviously carrying on from Resident Evil 1. This time you don't take control of Jill and Chris, you take control of Leon and Claire. Scenario A and B discs. First time I actually played this was when I was staying at my grandparents. My next door neighbour but one, the lad there called Richard, and I used to go around and play computer games with him, sleep over and stuff. One time I went over to sleep at his house, and then he had another mate staying over as well called Griff. And his mum, this was Christmas Eve, his mum let him take Resident Evil 2 with him, which was his Christmas gift at the time, and we finished it in one night, and it was fucking amazing. It was brilliant. We stayed up till about 3 in the morning and finished it, and I wanted it for the following Christmas. So Resident Evil 2 for me is an A. I love the scenarios. I love how it sort of expands on the story. It goes into Raccoon City. You know, it sees how the T-virus affects a population rather than just a mansion. And it's just such a great game with all these sort of secrets where you can play as Hulk, Tofu, you know, just a really good game, really great sequel, probably one of the best sequels I think in history. So I'm going to keep that as an A. In fact, I'm putting it as an S. Resident Evil 3, which sort of takes place in this weird sort of time frame. It's like it has it starts. It's like crosses over. It starts on its own sort of day, but it crosses over into Resident Evil 2. It's a little bit more actiony. There's a dodge mechanic. There's a nemesis chasing you throughout the game, which I thought was added another layer of fear. We could open doors, and you know he could actually pursue you through different rooms. So I really enjoyed Resident Evil 3. It wasn't as good as Resident Evil 2. I don't think anything ever will be. But Resident Evil 3 comes in as an A for me. Obviously, replaying a character. My favourite character of the Resident Evil series is Jill. She always has been from day one, and I think she's amazing. So I'm going to skip off all these sort of ones that some of these I haven't even played. I've dabbled with them. Some of them I haven't even touched. But I'm just going to go mainline for now. Resident Evil Code Veronica. A lot of people crying out for this to be remade. I think it should. I think it's definitely... I'm not keeping it at a C there, by the way. I think it was an amazing... First played this on the Dreamcast. It was a launch game on the Dreamcast. Then it came to other platforms later down the line. I actually own this on PlayStation. It's a PlayStation 4 game that I can play. I actually thought about streaming it again. It is fucking hard. It's a hard Resident Evil game. You take control of Chris Redfield again, and Claire and Chris Redfield. It also sets up the return of Albert Wesker. Obviously, Wesker dies at the end of Resident Evil 1, and then he comes back in Code Veronica, and he's all sort of superpowered, and he's obviously... it's explained in one of these other games what happens to him. But there was actually a YouTube series called The Wesker Chronicles, where it's the guy who did the Wesker voice, and he's narrating what happened to Wesker throughout the whole of the games. So he's actually active in these games as well. I think he's the one who actually shoots Ada. But Code Veronica was a great game. It was hard. I think it had a really interesting story with the Veronica virus and the Ashley twins. The return of Chris was always nice as well, but it was a really brutally hard game, very, very hard. But I would probably put that as an A. I really enjoyed it. And it fully deserves a remake, because it's not a mainline title, like it's just a spin-off, but it certainly is definitely worth revisiting it, in my opinion. And then we've got Resident Evil Remake, the remake of Resident Evil. And the reason why I've put Resident Evil there is because this game automatically for me just goes to the top. It is the best, or was the best, Resident Evil remake. Obviously before Resident Evil 2 remake came out. This game was amazing. It came out on GameCube. Played it on GameCube. Just the lighting. The fact that they've added more puzzles, but the mansion's the sort of same layout, but they've added different rooms. I usually try and play it at least once a year. It's a game that I just love to go back and revisit. I think it would be amazing if this got the Resident Evil remake treatment again, in the style of Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil 4. I feel like walking around the mansion in that sort of tight camera that Resident Evil 2 remake had would be amazing. I think it would just be a great. I've seen a lot of people say that when the remake conversation comes in, people say, well, it's already been remade. Yeah, but it's like an old remake, and it's in an old style of the tank controls of like the old style Resident Evil games, like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3. So I genuinely think that this would, benefit from a Resident Evil remake, like the style of this and this. Again, still has a bit of cheesy dialogue with it, but the whole adding like Lisa Trevor and what happened to her father, because he was the architect of the mansion, and he gets trapped in there, and his own booby traps sort of trap him into the mansion, is brilliant. So I loved it. I thought it was a great game. It's definitely up there. And then we go on to Resident Evil Zero. Now, a lot of people don't really particularly enjoy this. I think this is where the idea of co-op came up with Resident Evil Zero, because you could flick between. Obviously, you could flick between the two characters, which was Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen. It's set before Resident Evil, so in Resident Evil you're going into the mansion to find out what happened to Bravo team, because you've lost communication with them because they've gone in to investigate first. In this game, you are part of Bravo team, and you find out what happens to them after their helicopter crashes, and what happens to all the people in the team as well. And it just takes you right through to the end, where they're just about to go into the mansion and create the events that started in Resident Evil. I enjoyed this game. It's a bit of a pain in the ass when there's no sort of like, every Resident Evil game has a sort of chest where you can put items, and there's safe rooms and stuff. Resident Evil Zero doesn't have that. It's just basically you just drop your items on the floor and you have to remember where they are. It's quite a difficult Resident Evil game, because you've also got to, when you switch between your characters, you've got to make sure that your character's in a safe. So if I'm switching from Rebecca to Billy, and I forgot about a zombie in a room and I switch to Billy, I'll be playing as Billy for a little bit, and then you'll hear Rebecca screaming on the radio saying help. You switch back over to Rebecca and a zombie's chewing her face off. So you had to have that sort of place to be like, I'm going to have to leave this person in a safe place. But there was a lot of backtracking, which is sort of classic Resident Evil, but dropping stuff on the floor and remembering where you've put it was kind of a bit of a ball ache. I used to just I just delegated a main hallway or something, or a main room, and I used to use that as a inventory room and just drop everything on the floor that I didn't need. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed finding out what happened to Bravo team, Rebecca's journey as well, because Rebecca's quite a weak character in Resident Evil. She comes across as a very sort of like, she only crops up on Chris's story. But she comes off as this like little rookie, and she's kind of timid and frightened. But in this game, you sort of see her as a part of the Bravo team, and she is the newest part of the team, but she's also a fucking tough cookie. So I like this game. I would probably put this at put it at a B. I would say I would put that at a safe B there. And then we get to, there's a lot of games here that's just like, I've dabbled with Resident Evil Outbreak. I've played Survivor. That was on the Game Boy. Never played Survivor 2. Now, this is going to be controversial. Resident Evil 4. I fucking hated Resident Evil 4. And there's a story to it where Resident Evil 4 also came out on the GameCube, and before I played Resident Evil 4, the original Resident Evil 4, the only games that I'd experienced was these Resident Evil games where it was all about zombies, Umbrella, it was fixed camera angles, it was tank controls, you know, it was scene backdrops that you just sort of walk through. And I remember sitting in an IT class and talking to a friend at the time called Lee, and he was saying, "Oh, have you heard about Resident Evil's coming out?" And he got up some screenshots, and I was like, "Oh, cool." He goes, "Yeah, it's Leon." I was like, "Oh, I liked Leon." And he was like, "Yeah, there's no Umbrella's not involved in it. There's no zombies." And I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what is this?" And I got it, and I played it, and I finished it, and it sort of gave birth to like the over-the-shoulder, you know, third-person side of Gears of War, you know, camera. And it had a weird difficulty where you couldn't select a difficulty. It just got more difficult depending on how you played. But I didn't like it. I hated the story. Anytime Resident Evil 4 is brought up in a YouTube video or anything like that, it is like or YouTube, or like a Resident Evil timeline video. Resident Evil 4 is always quickly glazed over because the only thing that links it is it's got Leon in it, and Wesker pops up at the end and gets the last Plagueis virus off Ada. Other than that, it's got nothing to do with Resident Evil at all. It's very brown. The brown. It's very brown. The shades. It's all brown and grey. You know, doing suplexes and QTE events. It just wasn't for me. I can understand why people flock to it and say it's amazing, but yeah, I just wasn't on that bandwagon, unfortunately. So for me, that was. I mean, I think I'm being too kind to it because I really don't like Resident Evil 4, the original. I'll leave it there for now. Resident Evil 5. Highest selling Resident Evil game to date still. Because off the back of this, obviously. Because this was so critically acclaimed that everyone thought 5 was going to be an absolute banger. I preferred 5 to 4. 5, for me, has a better story. It's more linked into the Resident Evil universe. It ties up that rivalry with Chris and Wesker. Wesker in it is amazing. You know, he's got a lot of dialogue and he's just a really badass character. So I like the Chris versus Wesker in this. The DLC is really cool as well, where it's, you know, it's like a prequel where they're trying to find Wesker, and Jill and Wesker get thrown out of a window or something. You actually get to do that DLC. But in the story, there's this mysterious sort of villain who's got like a doctor's, old Victorian-style doctor's mask on. And you find out that it's Jill. So Jill crops up in it as well, and you have to fight Jill, and Jill's evil, and she turns good. Wesker's controlling her. I just loved all that sort of dynamic, and I would probably put this. It's not an S. It's not an A. It's either a B or a C, but I can't put it on the same level as this, so it'd have to be there. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Then we've got Resident Evil 6. Which is absolute dog shit. I fucking hated Resident Evil 6. Gears of Evil, a lot of people were calling it, because it was just full-on action. And if you notice as well, if you go through the franchise, you can see how the franchise has sort of evolved. Like Resident Evil Survival Horror, Resident Evil 2 Survival Horror, Resident Evil 3 a little bit more actiony with more. You start the game with a fucking assault rifle. You can build craft bullets on the fly, dodge mechanic. It was more action based. Code Veronica, I think, was still very, back to its roots. Then you've got the idea of two people but you play as the same person. Then it's Resident Evil 4, which is a little bit more actiony as well, less survival horror. And then we finally get co-op in Resident Evil 5, which totally takes any survival horror out of it for whatever. And if you didn't play co-op, Sheva just use. Don't give Sheva any healing items because you just use them like she's some sort of crack addict. And then Resident Evil 6, it was like 3 separate campaigns. You had Leon's campaign, Chris's campaign, Alex Wesker's campaign, and they all intertwine with each other. It's just Leon's campaign is more harken back to Raccoon City with actual zombies. Chris's campaign is them big BOWs that are like massive, and then you've got Alex Wesker's campaign where he's getting chased down by this nemesis-like creature. So it was almost like it was trying to sort of be all these games in one. And at the end, you just fight this like Tyrannosaurus Rex with no skin, and it's like Ada crops up again, and it's just I hated it. I thought it was shit. It was fun to play co-op. I mean, I played with one of my friends. We played through it, and it was good. It was a good laugh. You know, it's a good laugh as a co-op game, and you know, if you want a lovely co-op experience. But as far as like where the story was going, it was just so convoluted and too much going on. So I fucking hated Resident Evil 6. And then we've got Resident Evil Revelation. Oh no, I'll do the mainline one, sorry. Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 was... I enjoyed it. I thought the game was very... It was like a game of two halves. The first half of the game where you're in the Baker Mansion and everything like that, it was, for me, it felt very survival horror. It was very creepy. It was very scary. You know, you didn't really know what was going on with this sort of weird Texas Chainsaw-like family. It sort of kept you guessing all the way through. And then it got to a point where half of the game, you get through halfway, and then the game just starts throwing loads of rocket launcher, magnum, flamethrower, ammunition. And towards the end, assault rifle. Towards the end, it was just like, oh, I'm so fucking overpowered, you know, blowing everything up, shooting things, and it was, the enemies outside of the Baker family were very there was only sort of this black goo kind of enemies that came out the walls, and then there was a different variant of that was like a spider, but it was still the same looking sort of texture of the black goo. And towards the end of it, it was just like, it was more action. It went sort of like back to its action roots where, you know, there was loads of ammunition. You were just overpowered. It didn't really have a lot of Resident Evil sort of lore in it as well. It was like the only sort of flashes of Resident Evil you saw was this. You pick up a picture and it's like a helicopter, and you see underneath it's got the Umbrella logo, and it's like, what are they doing there? And then you find out that the little girl is the monster, but it's actually the old lady who's been sort of messing with this family's mind for so long because she was on a tanker and all this. But it was good. I enjoyed it. It was just a bit. It wasn't like it was like I say, it was a game of two halves for me. And it was available in PlayStation VR 1, which I actually really enjoyed playing it in VR. Would really like to see it get a PlayStation VR 2 update. It'd be nice. But where do I put it? It's going to have to go B again. I can't put it there because I don't like... I liked Resident Evil 4 more than 6. I liked 5 more than 4. 0 more than 4. Yeah, that's fine. So let's... Oh, Resident Evil Village. I'll do Village and then I'll go into the remix. Resident Evil Village... obviously, it's a sequel to Resident Evil 7. I'll leave it there for now. You play as Chris Redfield again, and you go to this village. It's almost like it was trying to recreate Resident Evil 4, because Resident Evil 4 is set in Europe. I don't like it when they say it's set in Europe. It's set in fucking Spain, because your currency you're collecting is pesetas and everyone's speaking Spanish. But it's set in this village in the mountains, and it's all about this virus that's like... where, you know, it creates these werewolves, and I really enjoyed the story to this game. I was really it's a hell of a lot better than Resident Evil 7. But I love the fact that you play as Chris again, and you are part of Neon Umbrella, which is like the good version of Umbrella now. Like, Umbrella's not a bad thing anymore, apparently. And you're looking for this Mother Miranda, who's like in charge of this like she's like well, you find out that she's a scientist, and you find out that she was a scientist and she was studying in this village, and it all does a full circle when it comes to this game, because it towards the end you find out that she mentored Marcus Spencer, who then went on to create Umbrella and did all the evil deeds and build the mansion and everything like that. And that's all mentioned in this game. But there's all these like different bosses. There's Lady Dimitrescu, who's this big, busty, tall, massive boobed, sort of like vampire, where she's got these daughters that feed off blood, and they're all part of this. It's like a virus that makes them do all this sort of stuff. It was actually marketed like she was the big bad of the game, but she dies off pretty quick, which is very disappointing because she was a great villain. Then you got the other ones. There's a toad that turns into this big monster, and then there's this. I can't remember the other one. Oh, the doll. It's like this ventriloquist doll, which is very PT. PT was a very massive influence for Resident Evil 7. But I enjoyed it. I loved how it kind of went back to its roots, and it affects the story of Resident Evil 1 and 0 in a way. So I love this game compared to 7, so I'm going to put that there. And now we're going to go into the remakes. And then I'll do any little games that I've picked up here. First one's Resident Evil 2 Remake. When this was announced, I nearly started crying. I was absolutely blown away the fact that they were doing this. And Resident Evil 2 Remake is... it actually got me around to the over-the-shoulder view. I feel like Resident Evil 4 was a little bit too early, premature for me. But playing Resident Evil 2 in the tight corridors and having that tight sort of camera where you're going through the whole game and you're seeing locations that you're so familiar with, like the police station, and the way you go into the police station at the start is different to how you do in the original game. But the way you go into the police station in the original game is then later on in Resident Evil 2 Remake. Just the whole, like, seeing the characters just all updated in visual graphics, like Claire, Chief Irons, Marvin, Ada. Seeing all these, these different characters just updated in graphics and stuff. It's kind of very sort of similar to this, where the police station was kind of same. There was things that they took out of the game which I wish they'd left in, but it's very much the same sort of experience. And I feel like seeing the lickers and just seeing like how gory it is and the jump scares and Mr. X chasing you through the whole game was like amazing. You could be in one part of the police station and he could be in the other, and you'd hear his footsteps. If you shot your gun off, he would then know where you are. He'd come straight for you. And you could mess around with him and stuff as well, which was kind of cool. But it was really... I did that extra layer of tension just having Mr. X going dum, dum, dum. Sometimes you would like be walking towards a door and he just comes through it, and it was just like, oh my god, it was amazing. So this, to me, it's just up there. Phenomenal. I almost feel like I should put that down there now. No, I'll leave it where it is. So that's where I'm going to put that. Also got the platinum for that as well. Resident Evil 3 Remake. I was absolutely pumped for this game. Really looking forward to it. Once again, taking control of my favourite character in the franchise, Jill. The game starts off strong. You are... Obviously, it takes place in the sort of same time frame. It's Jill's story of how she gets out of the city, but it all crosses over where it ends the same, where the nuclear thing's coming in. So she's getting out of the city. She bumps into Brad, who was the helicopter pilot for Resident Evil. Last two surviving members of... Oh, no, sorry. No, there's a few of them. So Rebecca's alive. Chris is alive. So she's like the... So it's her, Brad Vickers, Chris, and Rebecca, who are like the last remaining surviving members of the Stars police force. And the objective of the Nemesis is to kill the STARS operatives. Obviously, Chris and Rebecca aren't in this game, so it's just Jill and Brad. And it starts off strong. You know, the Nemesis is kind of like Mr. X, where he's chasing you, he just jumps down in front of you, he can swing off buildings and just corner you and stuff, and just run through, and you know, he can just hunt you down. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. This is like going to be like Mr. X on crack. And the first sort of act until you get onto the train is really good. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. After that, though, Nemesis just turns up as a boss fight, and I thought it was a really wasted opportunity, because he should have been like Mr. X. You know, it should have been a more brutal, fast, crazy, more pursuing Mr. X, but it wasn't. It was just this, like, oh, he's here again, it's going to be a boss fight, or we're going to fight him on top of a car park, or we're going to fight him on top of a building site, or we're going to fight him on top of a, you know, in a courtyard with a fountain, you know, and we're going to, eventually it was just you stick a gun in his mouth and blow him up because he's just this big sort of thing, you know. And I was disappointed. It was still a good game, but for me it wasn't great. I still think it's better than 4. I think it's better than these lot as well. I'm going to stick it there, actually, just to be conservative. But yeah, kind of disappointing. You know, the hospital bit as well. They left loads out of it as well. You know, there's a part in the original Resident Evil 3 where Jill actually goes back to the police station. So you are playing as Jill, but you're walking around the corridors of the RPD. Obviously, it's a different time period before Leon's even got there. So different doors are open, different things are barricaded up, and you see different parts of the police station and stuff. I really was disappointed when, in Resident Evil 3 remake, it's Carlos that goes back to the police station to find this doctor or whatever it is, or this I can't remember if it's like a notepad or a videotape or a recording of something, but it's Carlos that goes back into it. And I feel like it would have been better if it was Jill, and you could have seen something where there's a letter from Chris as well that Carlos picks up, and it doesn't sound like Chris. You know, it's like he's talking about hot babes and all this sort of stuff. But it would have been, I think it would have had more weight if Jill went to the police station, and there would have been few more Easter eggs of like, oh, this is, you know, my desk or whatever, or she got something from Chris's locker or something like that. So it was a little bit disappointing, but it was, again, more action focused. You know, Resident Evil 2 remake was certainly more survival horror. This was definitely action, you know, constant, again, machine guns and all that sort of jazz. Resident Evil 4 remake, absolutely loved it. I know I hated the original, but I think after playing Resident Evil 2 remake and 3 remake, I was already sort of warmed up to the Resident Evil 4 style. And I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was great. Excuse me. I didn't think it was I didn't think it was like amazing. Do you know what I mean? Not like this level, not Resident Evil 2 level. But it was better than Resident Evil 3 for me, so I'm going to stick that there. But it was a little bit more expansive in the story. It tried to add more things about Umbrella and everything like that. So I thought it was a better game than this piece of shit. And that's where we're at for that. Resident Evil Revelations, these are all the spin-offs and stuff now. So let's go through Survivor. Survivor was obviously like a Time Crisis light gun game that I didn't particularly enjoy. I'm going to put that there. Never played Gaiden, never played this, never played Dead Aim. Outbreak, I really enjoyed Outbreak at the time. I thought it was absolutely mind-blowing how you could play Resident Evil cooperatively online against other people. For me, I would probably put these games here, just because I thought they were amazing for the time. I think they were way ahead of the time. Would love to see a remake of them, would be great, but we sort of got that with Resistance, and Resistance is a pile of shit. That's already going there. Umbrella Corps, played that. It's absolutely, if there was a lower tier, I'd put it there. Resistance would probably go there as well. Reverse, awful. Operation Raccoon City, nice idea, poorly executed. That's probably going to go there as well. These were also light gun games, but it took you through a different parts of the story. In this one, you actually find out what happens to Wesker after he gets killed by the Tyrant in Resident Evil 1. So I'm going to stick them here. The Mercenaries 3D, I think that was on the DS. Resident Evil Revelations. Again, anything with Jillian's a bonus for me. I loved it. I thought it was great. I played it on the Wii U first and then again on the DS. I've also got it on the Switch and the PlayStation. So I absolutely loved this game. I thought it was brilliant. So I'm going to stick that up there as well. Revelations 2, I have got it. I've never played it. I can't put it up. I can't put it on there for because I haven't played the game. I think that's it, really. I think that's where we're at. These 3 games are just amazing. That's good. Yeah, I'm quite happy with this. That's where I'm just going to leave everything there. So that's my that's my tier list. That is my tier list. Oh shit. So that's just something there differently. I mean, I do like my Resident Evil games. It's interesting where to see where the franchise is going to go next. Obviously, Capcom have come out and said that they're going to remake more games, and they're running out of remakes. To be honest with you, there's only really Resident Evil 1 that they can remake again. Code Veronica. And I think that's about it. Odd 5, Resident Evil 5. But then again, like, if they do Resident Evil 5, are they going to remake Resident Evil 6? If they remake Resident Evil 6, it has to be start again, scrap the old game, totally rewrite it. But it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know where they're going to go with the remakes. I think Resident Evil 5 is probably a safe bet because it would follow on from Resident Evil 4, from what happened towards the end of that game. But I would like to see Resident Evil 1 remake in the style of Resident Evil 2 remake. I think that would be amazing. I think it would be great. But we just have to wait and see. We've also got Resident Evil 9 in the works as well. Interesting to see what that's going to be. I don't know if that's going to carry on to Ethan. That was something else I didn't like about the Resident Evil 7 and 8 games was Ethan. Such a bland, awful character. So I don't know where Resident Evil 9 is going to take place. If it's going to be first person, I think it probably will be. I think 7, 8 and 9 is a trilogy in its own self. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on where I sort of put the Resident Evil franchise. A great franchise that's still going, that I've grown up with. I would love to do a Legend of Zelda tier list as well. Consoles, that would be kind of cool to do that. That's my Tamagotchi that I got for Christmas. Little R2-D2 one there. Which is kind of cool. Still alive. So, responsibility. So that's it. That's my little tier list there. Just wanted to come on and do that just as something different. I will try and do a few more. And if you want to subscribe, give us a subscribe. If you don't worry about it because I couldn't care less, to be honest with you. I probably should care more than I do. I probably should actually care about making more content and, you know, creating a bit of a following. But you know, life's that busy at the moment. It's just, especially trying to plan a wedding this year as well. So I will try and get on as much as I can. But for now, take care of yourselves. See you later.